Welcome, everybody, to the Total Economic Impact of Replicated webinar. My name is David Hallinan. I am the Director of Content Strategy here at Replicated, and I am joined by the one and only best Forrester consultant I've ever had the pleasure of working with, Mr. Byron Ramirez.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Sorry, Byron, please.
No, it's just nice to be here.
Yes, and we appreciate you being here. So as a quick housekeeping note, please enter any questions you have in the chat or the dedicated Q&A feature. We'll do our best to cover them as we go, but if we miss any, we will circle back at the end with the Q&A portion that concludes our webinar. Cool. So to kick this off, I wanted to briefly introduce Replicated for those of you who may not be familiar with what we do here. Replicated is a fully featured platform that helps independent software vendors reliably ship and then maintain enterprise-grade applications securely and easily. So Replicated got its start back in 2015 when our co-founders recognized that Kubernetes and containerization were likely to converge as the de facto standards to enable both ISVs and their customers to develop and consume enterprise-grade applications in a more secure way. They envisioned this new world where both vendors and customers could evolve beyond SaaS and traditional on-prem models thanks to containerization. So to back up that notion of container proliferation, we recently wrapped our 2022 State of Software Distribution Survey with over 550 participants from commercial software companies. And we found in one question that 90% of respondents reported that their customers are using containerized applications in their production environments. So one of the primary challenges of on-premises software is really managing that deployment. And conventional on-prem deployments take months of engineering time and require significant amounts of work. The rise of containerization in Kubernetes, which can help complete deployments in days, even hours, has really helped to span that gap. So as a result, our vision here at Replicated is to enable those software vendors to deliver and then manage these Kubernetes applications in any customer environment, be that private or public cloud, on-prem, or even in an air-gapped server. So as a result, we're proud that as of now, more than 2/3 of the Fortune 100 consume software delivered and maintained through Replicated. Replicated customers are delivering products to the most secure industries on earth, like financial institutions, healthcare organizations, manufacturing. So beyond the Fortune 100, our ISV customers are able to deliver these applications to the US and world governments, despite these heavy restrictions and security requirements that go along with contracts like that. And because of that, we're fortunate enough to have some of the largest names in several ISV categories, including DevOps, security, data, comms, AI/ML, and more. And that really leads us to this webinar today. One of our earliest customers, HashiCorp, is one that we like to highlight due to the fact that they built Terraform and Packer, these tools that ISVs often contemplate taping together to get an on-prem installer. And it turns out it's not that simple. So as Michel Hashimoto, the co-founder of HashiCorp, put it, we built Terraform, we built Packer, we built all of these tools that you theoretically glue together and you get an on-prem installer. Turns out there's a lot more to it. So HashiCorp turned to Replicated 3 years ago to help their software distribution model. And now every instance of Terraform Enterprise is shipped and maintained through Replicated. So knowing that HashiCorp saw this success through leveraging Replicated, we knew that when we entered into a TEI discussion with Forrester, that we wanted to focus on HashiCorp, to see their growth, to see their efficiency gains, and probably most importantly, to see the money that they were able to save. So we were thrilled to find out at a high level from this report that HashiCorp saw a 208% return on investment from using Replicated, over $3 million in total benefits, and a radical increase in their DevOps efficiency. Sweet. So that leads me to you, Byron. I'm going to turn this over now to Byron and let him give an overview of this report, as well as what some of the most important takeaways are. And like I said, at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions at all, please enter them into the chat, or you can hold your questions for the end. All right, Byron, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. We hope that you will find this webinar useful and informational. My name is Byron Ramirez, and I am the Forrester consultant who developed Replicated's TEI study. So here's the agenda of the items that we will be going over today, including a synopsis of the study findings. But before we get started, I would just want to share a few disclosures This document is an abridged version of a full case study, the total economic impact of Replicated, which was completed in December 2021. The study was commissioned by Replicated and delivered by Forrester Consulting Group. Forrester makes no assumptions as to the potential return on investment that other organizations will receive. Replicated reviewed and provided feedback to Forrester, but Forrester maintains editorial control over the study. The customer names for the interview were provided by the client, and Forrester does not officially endorse Replicated. So before we get too deep into the actual study findings, let's talk about what is a TEI study. Forrester is aware that next level business case justifications are increasingly important to technology investments. As such, Forrester's TEI methodology includes different elements, including IT impact, business impact, risk uncertainty, and strategic impact. Forrester's TI study includes components such as total cost of ownership, ROI, risk versus reward, scalability, and flexibility. So when we do these TI studies, we literally cover all of these different elements rather than just looking at the cost, rather than just looking at the IT impact. We are looking at the holistic impact on the organization.
And just as a side note here, Byron, how does Forrester go about making predictions for risk and uncertainty? Is that something that you'll cover later?
Absolutely, yeah. That is a great question, David. It is something that I'll definitely go over later because that is a question that a lot of people have. So yeah, I will definitely go over that in a few minutes.
Excellent.
So this TEI approach is a proven, consistent, repeatable methodology used to examine technology investments from a holistic perspective. And like I mentioned, it includes the benefits, the cost, the flexibility that you gain from using a solution, and the risk versus reward analysis. We look at the impact of the on the organization, but also, what are the rewards relative to the risk that the organization is taking by consuming this technology. So let's go over the project. We used a multi-step approach to evaluate the impact of Replicated. We did due diligence. We interviewed one of Replicated's customers. In this case, it was HashiCorp. We then developed a composite organization containing key attributes upon which we financially modeled the benefits and the costs associated with the investment in Replicated. We then combined the quantitative data and the qualitative information that we gathered from the interviews. We combine all of that into the final case study, which was also reviewed and approved by HashiCorp, in this case, the customer that we interviewed. And that was literally the approach that we took to complete this study. So let's go over the case study's executive summary. So again, through the customer interviews, we learned the following. ISVs face a challenge in managing and delivering deployments, scale containers, and container-based workloads. We found out that developing in-house installers are not necessarily an option, as they require significant ongoing engineering resources and investment. And we also learned that DevOps teams are therefore very limited in their ability to meet a wide variety of customer requirements. So here's a quote from a senior engineering manager we spoke to. If we did not use Replicated and decided to instead build an in-house solution, it would require several resources. We would have to build a platform from scratch, integrate with our existing licensing, do vendor customer management, do packaging, and do all of the tooling that comes with configuring the application. And we would have to write a scheduler and make sure that it all worked. It would be a major investment, end quote. So the TI study yielded a 3-year impact with the following key metrics. As David mentioned earlier, the ROI is 208%. And I'll go over that later, what that means from the financial perspective. The benefits amount to $3.34 million, and the payback period is less than 6 months. Here's another quote that we gathered from the interviews. Prior to using Replicated, there were several manual steps during the installation process that could be error prone. In addition to the friction and risk of errors, these efforts also required a fair amount of handholding. Since we moved to Replicated, the installation vehicle is much easier and faster, end quote.
So I had a question here, Byron. When it comes to benefits, I know that the two major takeaways from this report as far as quantitative data was development cost savings and efficiency gains. Is the benefits just the cumulative development cost savings and efficiency gains over this 3-year period put together?
Great question, David. That's a really good question. Yeah, the $3.3 million represents the cumulative development cost savings and efficiency gains over a 3-year period. So it's a combination of the two benefits, and those are essentially the present value of those benefits in today's dollars. And again, I'll talk more about that in a few minutes, what that means. But when we combine the two benefits, we got 3.3 million is what the organization got over the 3 years. And we used the data that we collected from the interviews to build a financial model that allowed us to calculate these numbers. So I'll go over these benefits in a few minutes.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. So the study also includes a section where we discuss the customer's background prior to using Replicated. And we also talk about the journey as they consider making an investment in Replicated. So based on the customer interviews, we found that the composite organization, and again, Forrester uses a composite organization that, in this case, we use one customer, and we know that it's HashiCorp, but we use a composite organization that represents attributes that other organizations may be able to relate to. So therefore, we found the following characteristics that potentially may be relatable. It is a software vendor with a global reach. It uses a B2B business model. It has approximately 1,600 employees and has used Replicated for 3 years. And the financial calculations that we used in the study are based on this specific composite that we used.
And with this, Byron, I know in the case of this TEI report, we were able to identify HashiCorp as the customer in question. But to my knowledge, these reports generally don't name the customer. How rare is it to have that composite organization be named? And how do you generally feel like that impacts the report?
That's a good question, David. Yeah, I would agree that it is not common to have an organization agree to be named in a TEI study. For the most part, the customers that we talk to are anonymous and remain anonymous. But in this case, the fact that HashiCorp agreed to be named is very indicative of how confident they are about the solution, and they wanted to share their story about the impact that solution has had on them. So I think that's what it means.
Excellent. Yeah, and we were very happy that they were comfortable with being named in this report.
So let's go over the drivers to make the investment. We learned that the organization was driven to become more agile and responsive to existing customer needs. We also learned that the organization wanted to reach new customer organizations that were shifting to cloud native architectures. And the organization also wanted to be able to deploy and scale containers and container-based workloads in any environment. So here is a slide with the key results from the study. You'll notice that there are two in green, and those are the two benefits that we were able to quantify. And those that are in blue are those that we named in the study or call unquantified benefits. So let's talk about these avoided development costs and increased DevOps efficiency in a few minutes. I will go over those later, but I really want to highlight the importance of these unquantifiable benefits in blue. At the time when we did the interviews, we were not able to capture data at that moment that would have been used in the financial model that we completed. So what we instead did is we named these as things that are being affected by using replicated. And we found that although there, at the time we did this is last year when we made the interviews, they were significantly changing the organization. So we found that there's an ability to deliver to diverse customer environments. The solution has given the customer flexibility of a cloud agnostic solution. They've been able to expand to some degree the addressable market. They've seen an improvement in time to market speed, improved deployment reliability and stability, simplified installation, and enhanced customer-facing support. So the report, if any of you read it, you will be able to find the details behind each of these benefits that we capture in our study.
Yeah, I think, at least from our perspective on the unquantified benefits, this was really interesting for us because while HashiCorp does not have a dollar amount to put to these unquantified benefits, there are things that we can now think about going forward as tracking and helping our customers track, because improved time to market speed and improved deployment reliability and stability clearly have revenue impacts on an organization. So even if we weren't able to extract it from this report, it's really given us good insight into the things that we should be looking into and helping our customers track in the future. So this was really interesting to find out.
Absolutely, yeah. We found the same thing. We found it to be very interesting and very telling that that you not only get these two hard dollar type of savings in green, but that you're also able to leverage other things that are very important to the ability to be competitive in the marketplace and deliver value to customers.
Yeah, and they really help just the qualitative aspects of a lot of the testimony going on in the report.
Absolutely. So now let's go over the financial results of the study. So as I mentioned earlier, we found the two main benefits: development cost avoidance and increased DevOps efficiency. So when we combine those two, they amount to 3.3 million. The figures in the study account for the possibility of different types of risk and uncertainty. So think of implementation risk. What if things don't go the way that they went for the customer we interviewed, and so on and so forth. So Forrester, we have, again, this TI methodology where we take into account different types of risk and uncertainty, and we build in calculations that do the risk adjustments to account for these different types of what-if scenarios. So all of these numbers that you see here and that you will read in the report have already built in those adjustments in case things are slightly different for someone else who might be potentially consuming this technology.
Okay.
So let's go over the first main category of benefits. This is what we call development cost avoidance. So we found a development cost avoidance benefit of 2.8 million. We learned that the organization has been able to avoid incurring development costs as it did not have to hire 6 additional FTEs. In this case, they would have been senior DevOps engineers, each carrying a fully burdened rate of $250,000 a year to develop a somewhat comparable in-house solution that would have taken at least 2 years to build. So here you see on your screen that in year 1 and in year 2, that is the FTEs that would be needed for those 2 years to work on some hypothetical solution, in-house solution, to try to address the needs that we already mentioned. And you'll notice that in year 3, there is a number of 1. That is that the assumption there would be that you at least would need 1 full-time employee to continue to maintain and manage the solution once it was built, assuming that things went according to plan. So therefore, if you multiply these numbers, you'll notice that overall there is a $2.8 million avoidance over those first 3 years. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that we got this interesting quote from the customer. If we were to try to build a platform to do close to what Replicated does, it would have taken 2 years, and we would need to hire 6 very senior full-time engineers who would need to be highly familiar with all aspects of DevOps. So that is exactly where we were able to kind of build this benefit around based on this insight that we got from our interviews.
And I think with this, what struck me as the most interesting is not only that that there would have to be a dedicated full-time engineer that just stays on this project. So while this is a 3-year analysis, that 3rd year after they've maybe built out this MVP, we're talking about a senior DevOps engineer who's going to have to be tied to this project for as long as its life cycle is. But also that HashiCorp was very clear about, those 6 full-time engineers on those first 2 years is essentially building out an MVP. This is not necessarily being able to, no pun intended, replicate it. It was, if we wanted to, build the minimum viable product that would be able to do this, we're looking at 2 years here.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is exactly what we got from our conversations with them. Absolutely. And now here we have the other second major benefit category, which we call increased DevOps efficiency. So the increased DevOps efficiency benefit corresponds to the efficiencies that were gained by the DevOps team after using the replicated solution. So we found that there was a 20% efficiency improvement in year 1, which continues to grow over time. This efficiency grows to around 30% by year 3. So if we look at it from a numbers perspective, a dollar perspective, this represents a DevOps team efficiency benefit of $200,000 in year 1, which grows to about $300,000 by year 3. And I also have, of course, here we have another quote that all of you can see. That obviously is not just the DevOps team that is affected by the solution. There are multiple employees who are affected in one way or another. But here we just focused on capturing the value of the DevOps team and how much more efficient they become after they leverage replicated.
Which was very interesting for us to see, every different level of the organization touching the platform at some point. I had a couple questions with this. When we see increased efficiency, we see a 5% gain year over year here. I know that this is a 3-year analysis, but I mean, based on the predictive model, is this something where we would expect to see that efficiency grow past year 3 because we've seen a 5% jump each corresponding year?
That is a good question, David. As you mentioned, we only modeled the first 3 years, but there's always the possibility that the efficiency could potentially continue to be enhanced over time. Again, as we mentioned earlier, every organization is different, and how each organization leverages the solution may be slightly different. But yeah, we think that there is the possibility that efficiency might continue to increase to some degree.
And then could you also talk a little bit about line A6, the productivity capture? I can see that that we're having each of these numbers based on this 50% productivity capture. Can you walk through what that means?
Right, that's a good question. So yes, so what we did is we took the number of employees and we look at the number of hours that they become efficient, so they gain more hours. People get more time back in a sense, right? They can. So what we did is we used a 50% productivity capture, which represents the percentage productivity savings captured for productive work. So just because you have more time available doesn't mean that you're going to use it all on this project. We're just kind of assuming that there is a portion of your time that will be dedicated to some other productive work, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah. So we're saying that, the efficiency hours that were captured here, hypothetically, only half of that time would actually go into this project.
Correct.
Into that DevOps.
Into the DevOps. That's right. Exactly.
Okay, great.
So as I mentioned earlier, these unquantified benefits cannot go unnoticed. I mean, the study revealed that there are other benefits, like I said, that we couldn't capture with data. But the gist of it was that the organization has experienced enhanced customer-facing support. And the report actually goes into the details behind that. And as David mentioned earlier, that is actually something that obviously a lot of organizations are interested in, making sure that you are very close to your customer, right? We also found that the organization or that the cloud agnostic solution enables delivery to diverse customer environments. And we definitely found that there is a faster and more simple installation with better reliability and stability, and improved time to market speed was another major category that we felt should be highlighted in the report.
Yeah, this was like I said, very interesting from the unquantified benefits perspective, especially with a lot of the qualitative quotes in the report talking about the cloud agnostic solution was HashiCorp really struggling with being able to deliver to customers that had all of their existing workflows and data living in different major cloud platforms. So, customers across AWS or GCP or Azure, and being able to take a step back and not choose which one of those major cloud platforms to tie Terraform Enterprise to, being able to accommodate customers that, already are ingrained in those platforms wherever they may be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to that point, the next slide actually shows a quote that is very, consistent with what you just said. Before using Replicated, we could only distribute in one cloud. We wanted to expand into other clouds that were gaining more popularity with our enterprise customers. We needed a cloud agnostic solution to service those customers. Replicated gave us that abstraction that allowed us to provide cloud primitives in any cloud.
Yeah, and that's just one of the examples. It's a fantastic quote, and I loved learning about this side of the report from it.
So with respect to the cost, obviously we talked about the benefits, but what are the costs? And so the report includes a section where we break these down and we analyze the costs that are associated with making an investment in Replicated. We have two major categories. The first one is implementation cost, which consists of internal resource time spent, time and money spent on implementation. So we found that it was 3 FTEs. They were primarily field and support engineering resource types, and it took roughly about 4 months to implement. The other category of cost is what we call ongoing costs, which consist of annual license fees paid to Replicated. And that kind of, again, the report kind of discusses all this. We looked at the volume-based pricing, and it assumes a enterprise tier plan. Again, the breakdown of these numbers is in the report, and we strongly urge anyone who's interested in Replicated to reach out to Replicated about costs associated with investment.
Yeah, but what was really interesting for me on this one was, obviously licensing fees. HashiCorp is a very big company with lots of licensed versions of Terraform Enterprise out there. It was really about those total implementation costs, because we saw a few slides back that they were guessing it would take them, a minimum of 2 years with 6 full-time employees in order to actually build out this MVP. In reality, it took them 3 FTEs that were, working at a lower pay scale than the ones they would need had they built it in-house. And they also implemented it in only a 4-month timeline. So, seeing that based on their estimations as to how long it would take them was really a fantastic takeaway here.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is what we found in the interviews. So TEI analyses include, like I mentioned before, discussion of flexibility. What does the solution do in terms of helping an organization potentially become more flexible? So we found that Replicated provides an organization with the ability to engage in future initiatives for additional benefit. But it is important to note that how Replicated is leveraged and used will influence results. As I talked about earlier, the study contains risk discounted calculations, which factor in impact risk and implementation risk, including the possibility that the number of dedicated DevOps FTEs may be lower, or the possibility that the efficiency experienced by the DevOps team might be a little bit lower. But again, the numbers that you see in the report and the numbers that we are focusing on today already take those calculations into account. And the ROI and benefits have those risk adjustments.
And just to clarify, the risk adjustments is slightly hypothetical in that you add it into the model because it could possibly be more for another composite organization or another organization, but it could also be under the numbers that we add into the model, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. They can be higher, but they can definitely be lower. So the ROI potentially may actually be higher than 208. depending on how the solution is leveraged and how it's managed. Absolutely.
Excellent.
So again, just to kind of summarize, the overall ROI for the project for the 3-year investment in Replicated is 208%. And the NPV, the net present value, is $2.26 million with a payback period of less than 6 months. Just to kind of go over what ROI means, in case someone is curious, ROI is a project's expected return in percentage terms. So we literally take net benefits. So that would be benefits minus cost. So we take those net benefits and we divide them by cost. And then we get a number and we translate that number into percentage terms.
And the way that I've thought about it in the past, and I know we've discussed, is that the 208 ROI is essentially what you're getting back for every dollar you put in. So for every dollar HashiCorp put in, they're getting $2.08 back. And that payback period of 6 months means within 6 months, their initial investment was already back to them.
That is correct. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, David. Yeah. You spend $1 and you get $2.08 back. Right. Exactly.
Excellent. And then could you walk through what net present value means exactly?
Sure. Net present value is the present or current value. So using today's dollars, right? So you're bringing it back in today's dollars of future cash flows. So you have outflows and inflows. Outflows is what you pay, inflows is what you get back in terms of benefits. So you net those cash flows and you use a discount rate to bring them back to today's dollars. So this is all in a financial model. And after doing that, we got a $2.26 million. So it means that in today's dollars, this investment is worth that amount. And it indicates, since the number is positive, that the investment should be considered. It's not in the red. It's definitely something that an organization should consider in case they're interested.
And so does that mean that the net present value is essentially the total benefit number that we go over earlier in the report minus the investment that HashiCorp put into it?
Yeah, exactly. It takes all of that. It takes the inflows and outflows, in this case, the investment that HashiCorp made, the amount that they paid to implement and the expenditures that they had. It takes that into account. And it nets it with all the benefits that they gain, the DevOps efficiency that we talked about and the development cost avoidance. It nets everything and brings it into today's dollars. So this project yields a benefit, a net present value overall benefit of 2.26 million.
Excellent.
And that is all I have for today. Happy to answer any questions, but thanks, David and Replicated, for inviting me to join today.
Thank you so much, Byron. I really appreciate that run through, and it's been a pleasure working with you during the creation of this report. As a side note, I mentioned this at the beginning. All registrants to this webinar will receive a follow-up email with a PDF version of the report, as well as a handy overview infographic that Forrester uses to outline major takeaways.